Okay, first let's get out our palette and transfer some of the colors that we're going to use for the first layer, which is the sky. So I'm using this pale pink and light yellow and gold and probably a little bit of red also, and this amber color, and maybe some of this rose. And then these are the colors I'm going to draw from when I paint my sky. Next, let's get the paper wet. Okay, once the paper is wet, then we're going to remember to paint mostly on the top like 2/3 of the sky right here. So I'm going to start with just a pale yellow that you can probably barely even see along the bottom. And then I'm going to add some gold. And I'm just using the ink from the markers right with my paintbrush like watercolor. So I'm using some of the gold, and now I'm going to grab some of these pinks over here and just use my paintbrush to paint this textured sky. So I'm doing red at the top, and once I use the red with the water, it kind of turns into a pink also. And then just grab some orange and keep making these lines in the sky to create this kind of textured sunset. Our sky is dry. After I painted this textured sunset using those different colors and using just the ink from the brush markers, I dried it, and now let's paint our first mountain layer. I'm using this olive black color. That's what this olive color is called. And I'm going to add just a little bit more black to it to give it a little more tint. And now I'm going to paint, I'm going to do kind of like a dip and then go back up again, starting like this. So I'm just going to paint all along here. The thing when painting with brush markers, ink from brush markers, is you don't have as much time as you do with watercolor to paint with wet paint before it starts to dry and leave dried paint lines behind. So you have to move pretty fast in order to bring down the full color before you start to get any paint lines. And so once I have, my first priority is to get this layer wet. And then once I have this layer wet, I'm going to go back with the actual brush pen and just paint along the ridge here to add some texture. And I can even go on top of the ridge to add some definition to the mountain above it. So I'm just trying to add some texture while the paint is still wet. Texture and color to create that kind of misty effect that I like to paint so much. So, and then while everything is still wet, I'm just going to go back in with my paintbrush and manually blend some of this together. Now, once again, because this is, because the ink from brush markers works differently from watercolor, it's going to dry really quickly. So you have to move kind of fast. But you get this really fun effect if brush markers are the only thing you have on hand or you're wanting to practice with something new. Well, our first mountain layer is dry, and now I'm going to paint the second mountain layer using the black. And this time I'm just using this black, and it's gonna be just beneath the green mountain layer. I didn't add quite enough ink to the black, so I'm gonna go back after I've painted this layer with water and put more ink on my ceramic palette to add to this mountain layer. I don't wanna do the top thing quite yet where I touch the marker to the paper, so I'm just gonna add some to the palette here, always moving at an angle, and pick up some of this ink and just paint with it just like watercolor. And then while that layer is still wet, I'm just gonna take that olive black and paint along the bottom of this mountain layer to add some background texture for when we paint in the flowers, which are the foreground of this painting. So I'm just using the side of the marker here to paint along the bottom of this mountain layer. And it's still wet, so it's kind of blending in naturally to the bottom. Now I'm going to take my paintbrush and just kind of move it along a little bit. I don't necessarily want it to be smooth. It's okay if it's a little textured, but I'm just moving it up just slightly. Finally, we're going to paint the foreground flowers for this picture. So my flowers are like right up close. So it's like you're bending into the grass and getting a shot of the flowers up close with the mountains in the background. So the flowers are actually going to go above the mountains. So I'm just going to paint, this is indigo, some little flowers like this, and then with my pale violet, I'm just going to give it a little more. So something tragic happened in the middle of recording. My camera stopped for some reason, but I'm gonna recap what I painted. I was talking about it before. There wasn't really much more to it other than I painted 5 of these flowers, and then drawing directly on the painting using this olive black, I painted some stems starting from the bottom and connecting it to the flowers, and then I painted some leaves also using just the marker right on top, and then also from the bottom just kind of flicked my wrist upward to finish the painting with a bunch of grass along the bottom so that we create this wildflower effect that's coming off of a hillside. I apologize for my camera coming off, so you didn't get to see all of that in action necessarily, but I'll do another one of these in the future so that you can see exactly how that goes using this brush marker right on the paper to create the grass and the stem connecting the flowers. But I'm still going to post this video because I think that it could be a really helpful tutorial, even, you know, missing the last 5 or 6 minutes or so as I connected the flowers and added the final touches. So thank you for joining me. I hope this video was helpful for you and that you had fun watching it. And if you want to stay tuned for other tutorials, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks.